Hi, and welcome to Z Games. Recorded live at 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and broadcast nationally over the Community Radio Network, Z Games brings you the latest gaming news, reviews and interviews from across Australia and around the world.
You're listening to Z Games, or as we've just discussed, possibly Z Games this week. Australia's most beloved gaming radio show, coming to you live from the 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and heard around the nation on the Community Radio Network. I am Lee, and joining me in the studio this week, Razor.
Hey.
Ms. Candi Payne.
Hi, everyone.
She's back.
I'm back.
She's back.
Yep.
Jody Macgregor.
Hello.
Razor. What were we listening to before there?
That was Regurgitator with Sine Wave.
Bit of the Gurge.
The Gurge, that's right.
That's them. What are we talking about for this episode? I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Really?
I've come in with nothing prepared.
Okay, well, we are talking about Dungeons & Dragons for 5th edition.
Apparently you don't know either.
Yeah. 5th edition. So Lee, Jody and I, as well as the people from the book club, Sky and Grace, have had a couple of sessions of the new rule set. And we're here to give you our impressions.
That was fun and will be more fun. Do we have bits of that to play for our listeners?
We've got a few minutes of some of the choice gold from the sessions to play for you guys, so
Nice.
Hopefully you don't get too nerded out by that.
There's some real zingers in there, apparently.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Lee, you've also been playing Dying Light.
That I have, yes.
So what's that about, briefly?
It's the spiritual sequel to Dead Island that takes the city overrun with zombies and hitting them with pipe wrenches of that game, and then incorporates a magnificent vertical movement and parkour system, and just cranks everything right up into delicious levels of awesomeness. So I think I'm going to be spending the last few minutes of this show convincing you to also get it so we can play in co-op together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my mind is open.
Yes. Get your wallet open. That's the real point.
Okay. Alrighty, but let's kick this episode off with the Week in Gaming News headlines with the lovely Miss Candi Payne.
Thank you. Sega will reduce its workforce significantly to refocus on digital PC and mobile games. An early retirement package will be offered to around 300 employees, and the iconic San Francisco headquarters will be shut down. Sega also teased a new Sonic the Hedgehog game, a mobile free-to-play endless runner.
So, in this case, Sega do what Nintendo don't means significantly downsize and refocus on mobile.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's just a shame.
Yeah, that's...
I think it sucks for those 300 people, especially.
Yes.
But it's also a shame that this is where they're at now.
Yeah.
It really is, because long-time gamers will remember that Sega and Nintendo were once equal rivals.
Yeah.
With more or less equal market share of the home console thing. Unfortunately, Nintendo won. So all those pictures in those, old Nintendo Power magazines where the readers would send in pictures of Mario, gutting Sonic, they were all right. They were all prophets.
Dreadful.
Bunch of oracles. But, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing for Sega to focus on, digital delivery of their games, because they have a massive backlog of really, really good stuff that they've never released on the PC, that they could release on the PC. They could make something out of that. Please release all your old great games on the PC. Sega.
Please.
They're listening.
Kindly, Lee. Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the Final Fantasy franchise, will receive a Lifetime Achievement Award at the 15th Annual Game Developers' Choice Awards. GDC Events General Manager Megan Scavio said, Final Fantasy helped pave the way for game stories that dealt with death, regret and character development in a mature and significant way, and we're proud to honour Sakaguchi-san as a true leader in the space and an inspired game developer. Sony Online Entertainment will break away from Sony and continue to operate independently. The studio, which was responsible for games like DC Universe Online, PlanetSide 2 and the upcoming open-world zombie survival game H1Z1, was purchased for an undisclosed sum by Columbus Nova, an investment firm based in New York. The studio will be renamed Daybreak Game Studio, and studio president John Smedley appeared optimistic about embracing multi-platform game releases, tweeting, "Can't wait to make Xbox One games," earlier this week.
That's a really surprising maneuver. I was not expecting Sony to do that.
No, not at all.
Surely there's still like a lot of money pouring in from EverQuest and the likes.
Well, hasn't H1Z1 done quite well? It seems like a lot of the DayZ audience have happily flocked over to it because here's the same thing, but slightly more polished.
Yeah, that's right. So it's weird. I mean, I hope it's good because they're doing interesting things like the EverQuest Next thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
Which has got all that terraforming stuff in it. And
so that you can make your own part of the landscape. That's a neat idea.
Yeah, I want that in a massive online game with also cat people for some reason. Like, yes. Yeah,
no, that's important.
Yeah, it's a good Bowie song, and I think we should integrate it into every video game that has terraforming.
Good thinking.
Good thinking, Lee. Yeah.
I look forward to what they do next.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for this week in gaming news headlines. Next up, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But to get us there, here is a song from a band called A Tribe Called Quest. And what's this one, Jody?
This is Scenario. Keep your ears out for Buster Rhymes boasting that he is a dungeon dragon.
Welcome back, listeners. This is, of course, Z Games that you've tuned into this evening, today, this morning, whatever time you are tuning in, listening to us. Razor, what were we just listening to?
A Tribe Called Quest with Scenario, and Jody chose that one because of the Dungeon Dragon reference.
Yeah, it was subtle. You might have missed it in there.
It wasn't subtle. It wasn't subtle, but it was great.
Okay, so the three of us have been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the old school pen and paper RPG, and to assist us we enlisted two of the hosts of Triple Z's book club, Sky and Grace.
They can read, so we needed help with that.
That's right.
Yeah, we're good with the games, with the words, though not so much.
Yeah, in books and stuff.
Yeah, so that was useful.
Yep, they helped us to play test it. But Dungeons & Dragons doesn't need much of an introduction, but Jody, would you like to provide the introduction?
Sure.
I hope you prepared one.
Are you prepared? Yeah, you are
All
now.
right. Dungeons & Dragons is the original tabletop role-playing game from 1978. So a bunch of nerds sit around a table and pretend they are in a fantasy story. One person is the dungeon master, which is less S&M than it sounds.
Only a little, though.
It's about being the narrator of a story who controls the parts of the world that aren't the heroes on their epic quest, while everyone else takes the role of one of those adventurers, like one of those Fellowship of the Ring type characters who are off on some kind of epic quest. And you have some rules so that the story that you are making up hangs together and makes a kind of sense, most of which involve having to roll weird-shaped dice. Mainly 20-sided dice. D20s are the order of the day. Everyone loves D20s.
That was actually quite concise.
Yeah.
Good work.
All right.
Yeah.
So this was in the days before, like, the gigantic, epic computer role-playing games that a lot of us love. But most of those games took at least a little bit of inspiration from the old Dungeons & Dragons
I think that's understating it.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft is just Dungeons & Dragons on your computer, quite blatantly.
Yeah, so, the history is rich, and there's... modern gaming owes a lot to Dungeons & Dragons. Why are you guys laughing?
No, you're right. Modern gaming does owe a huge amount. All of the things that we have, like in fantasy games, the leveling up, that's straight out of Dungeons & Dragons, and that's in every game now. Even racing games, and you can level up your gun in Call of Duty now.
Yeah.
That's a Dungeons & Dragons mechanic. And choosing characters based on race and class, and then having a bunch of characteristics and skills that define them. That's exactly how you create a character in Dungeons and Dragons. You don't have sliders to tell you how big your cheekbones are, but otherwise it's just like playing an Elder Scrolls or a Bethesda RPG.
So I guess then the question is that with this new edition that they've brought out, and we were specifically playing the starter kit, has there been any kind of reverse of that flow of inspiration? What are the new editions of Dungeons and Dragons taken from modern video games? Are they trying to appeal to the same audience or a new audience? And so it was fun to see what they had done and what had remained inherently the same despite 30-odd years of development. And
This new 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons feels to me explicitly like a throwback to earlier editions that weren't as influenced by video games. It seems like perhaps they've realized there are some things that video games do better and have sort of tried to actively hark back to some of the things that you can only do in a tabletop role-playing game that playing World of Warcraft or Neverwinter won't be able to do for you. It reminded me a lot of the 3rd edition rules that I was playing back in 2002 they came out.
Yeah.
And I know you were saying they reminded you of the AD&D 2nd edition from the 90s. It does feel like almost like a greatest hits where they've taken elements from a lot of the previous ones. So while I can definitely see some of the hardcore fans preferring a specific earlier edition that did like one thing and did it well, this seems like a really good introduction for new players, better than those older editions were, and also like the kind of greatest hits album that's everybody's at least second favorite. You know?
Yeah.
Like even if you prefer an older edition because you're that kind of nostalgic fan, this is probably your second favorite because it has most of the things you love in it.
Yeah.
It's just been streamlined a little bit and simplified.
And like a greatest hit album, it's actually in a format that you can play with relative ease rather than having to go and find your Victrola.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ray and I had spent a couple of years playing 4th edition together, and it was interesting comparing 5th to 4th because 4th was absolutely inspired by modern role-playing games, particularly MMOs. It had a real World of Warcraft feel to it, and I think that they were attempting, because it was like Wizards of the Coast had purchased it and were trying to reinvigorate the brand, and it felt to me like they wanted to make it work a bit like a card game mixed with the powers that you get in an MMO, and I think that diluted some of its charm and overcomplicated a lot of things. So that edition, it gave you too much stuff, and a lot of that stuff just got in the way of just being able to sit down and role play. And that's like what I really enjoyed the most out of our session, was just that there was clearly a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, but for a player, you could just say you wanted to do a thing and look at your single sheet and roll some dice and stuff happened.
It does. I think it's important that they have rules that encourage role-playing. Like, you can design a game that just has rules that govern combat and let people fill the gaps between combat with role-playing as much as they want. But I think if you have some kind of mechanical system to occasionally encourage you to roleplay, then players are much more likely to pick up on that and realize that's what they're supposed to be doing, and you get more of it, and it gets to be more fun. And something that I like about this new version of Dungeons and Dragons is that right there on your character sheet, as well as telling you how strong you are and how many hit points you have, you also have, every character has a flaw and a goal and a bond, which might be like a bond to another person who's important to you, or a thing or a place that you want to protect. All of these things that tell you who you are beyond just being a level 3 fighter or whatever. And they have a mechanical impact, because if you play to those things, if your flaw is greed and you do something dumb because it's the kind of dumb thing a greedy person would do, you get a thing called inspiration, which you can then spend later on to get a bonus die to help you out when you're in trouble. And so it encourages you, by using the rules, to actually play that character in a way that might be interesting, but might also not be the wisest thing to do. It means that you don't just think what would be the best thing to do in every situation, so I get the most money and I get to kill the most things. Sometimes it says, if you're actually acting as this character, you might do dumb things. And that's something you tend not to get in video games, where you're always playing by the best possible objective way.
Yeah, I mean, as gamers, I think there's natural inclination to want to win, to try and do your best and maximize your character's potential. So when it comes time to act upon your character's weakness, you might be a bit hesitant to. So it's good that there's a reward system there to help you roleplay your weaknesses and strengths.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're playing a tabletop game, like, everyone's a winner at the same time, and the only time that the game you feel like a loser is actually when there's one person there actively trying to win it, Like, that person is disrupting the flow of the thing.
Or when you're playing there and like a bunch of cool indie kids walk past and say, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Then we all feel like losers.
Well, that's why we did it in the comfort of our own homes, that we never had
this
to deal
is
with
why
that.
I wasn't allowed to play, because I just like to win, and I was told very clearly and repeatedly there is not one winner. Everybody's a winner, which I just couldn't take.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I'm a winner. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting because not all players have the same experience. I mean, as well as different character classes, one player must assume the role of the dungeon master. That person has to guide the characters along, construct the journey, and basically be the mind behind the game. And this time it was you, Jody, who was the dungeon master. How did you find running the game?
I found it pretty smooth compared to a lot of previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons. There are simpler role-playing games out there, but I do like that this is a simpler version of Dungeons & Dragons than I've played before. And it helped a lot that we were using the starter kit that is set up to be your smooth introduction. It's a box with the dice and a bunch of character sheets that already have characters on them you can just hand out, and it has a trimmed down basic rule set. It's just the stuff that you need to start playing. And quite a long adventure, a story to start you out with. I was surprised at how big the scenario they give you to start playing is. It'll take you up to level 4 or 5 or something. It's actually like there's weeks of play just in the starter box.
Yeah, we had like 2 4-hour sessions, and I feel like we've gotten far enough into it, but we've barely scratched the surface of the entire adventure. That's a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to actually continuing with the campaign and making that available for our listeners. Speaking of them and the stuff that we recorded, Ray, do we have a sneak peek that we can play for the people at home?
Yeah, that's right. So we did indeed record our sessions, and you can head to our website, which is thatgamesau.net, later this week to check it out and download it. It'll be like an episodic release, following our party's adventures and hijinks. But we thought we'd just put together a little highlight reel of all of the action that happened on our D&D adventures. So hope you guys enjoy this.
The 4 of you are currently on a job which has you guarding a caravan of supplies on its way from Neverwinter to the frontier town of Phandalin. It's just you and an ox and a wagon full of crap.
Yeah.
So who are we anyway? Like,
We're an adventuring crew. Oh, but who are we
are
individually?
we individually as...
Well, you better introduce yourself first.
Well, I'm Dane Ironfist. I'm a soldier. I'm a proud hill dwarf. I'm always polite and respectful.
Right.
I don't trust my gut feelings, so I tend to wait for others to act.
Yeah, so I'm Quarian Silverfrond. I'm a wizard. I'm an acolyte of my god, Ogma, god of knowledge and what have you.
So you probably live at the temple as an acolyte.
Yes.
You're not a priest, but you stay there.
Yes, that's right.
You're studying.
Yeah, I have a tome of knowledge that I carry with me. It's the record of my life's work, and no vault is secure enough to keep it safe. That's the thing that I have a bond with. Other people have a bond with people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's my journal. Also, I'm a little bit snooty. I use polysyllabic words that convey the impression of erudition. I've spent so long in the temple that I have little experience dealing with people on a casual basis. For me, knowledge is the most important thing. The path to power and self-improvement is through knowledge.
I am Cade Alderled. I am a halfling thief with an aunt that I'm very fond of. She is Quellen, and I tend to send her some of my ill-gotten gain. She doesn't know it's ill-gotten. She thinks I'm a very respectable business halfling, and she must never know.
Oh.
I'm Shireen Akbari, a human fighter. I'm from a very, very noble background. You might not have heard of my family, but that's because we were wealthy and powerful before it was cool.
Unpleasant, but for the greater good, you should cut off this goblin's face, wear it as your own, and infiltrate this hideout. Everyone...
I am not wearing the face of a goblin, you sociopath.
We're trying to save a human. All goblins are evil. I think we can all agree with that.
I feel I can probably sneak in there without wearing the face of a goblin.
I start cutting the face of the goblin off anyway, just to see if anyone else needs to do this.
While he's doing that, I start moving towards the entrance.
Listen, when you get in trouble, and you're wishing, ooh, I wish I had the face of a goblin.
Are there any traps inside from the interrogation?
Give me an intimidate roll.
That was a song taken from the Dragon Age Inquisition soundtrack, and that was a song that you'd hear if you were in the taverns in the game, right, Lee?
Yeah, that's right. So BioWare made the tavern songs available for free. Very briefly, I think you can purchase them at some point down the future. But anytime you enter the tavern in your keep, the bard will sing a song, and her repertoire changes based on your actions in the game, which is very, very cool. And also, she has a lovely voice.
I loved that song.
Yeah.
Jody's put up a link on the Facebooks to the free stuff, haven't you?
Yep, so you'll be able to download the whole album.
Yeah, cool.
And before that, you would have heard a little snippet of our play session. We were play testing Dungeons & Dragons, the 5th edition starter kit. And the special guests for that session were Sky and Grace from 4ZZ's book club. And they seemed to have a really good time as well.
Yeah, Grace has played 4th edition before. Sky has never played a tabletop role-playing game, but has an interest in them and just likes reading game books, because who doesn't love reading endless charts about the weight that rope possibly has, and then how many silver pieces it's worth, right? Moving on.
But Sky seemed to be the most enthusiastic, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He was really having a good time.
Yeah.
Even though he'd never experienced Dungeons & Dragons before. So it was a real testament to how beginner-friendly, I guess, the new rule set is.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very beginner-friendly, and it helped that he was playing the halfling rogue of the party. He was playing the sneaky character who was pretty easy to play. The one, if I had one criticism of the starter set, it's that the magic-using characters are still very hard to play. I could imagine if 5 people who'd never played Dungeons and Dragons before were starting with this, the wizard and the cleric in the party would give you a massive headache.
Yeah.
Because where every other character has like 1 or 2 cool things that they can do, like the fighter has a second wind ability so that if they get knocked down, they just sort of bounce right back up again. But the spellcasting characters each have 10 to 15 cool things that they can do, and you just sort of have to pick from them in advance, which means being able to compare all of these completely unique spells and make an informed decision about which ones you want to prepare in advance and then use them in a sensible way. And that's really hard. That's something I think that new players will appreciate more guidance with.
Yeah, I really appreciated the extra prep work that you had put in. You had written down all of the spells separately on little cards for me. And considering how card-focused the last D&D edition was, I was sort of surprised that this starter kit hadn't incorporated something like that, hadn't provided an additional prop or something for the spellcasters, because it is a lot of stuff to keep track of, and it really helps being able to physically do that in some fashion. So I'm hoping that maybe this is, the starter kit is something that can evolve, and that they might want to consider doing that, because it is like spellcasting. Ray, you were the cleric, so you also had a tome of whatever powers to choose from, and I found it a little bit of a struggle to even just choosing. There's a lot of information individually. How did you go with handling that?
My character sheet is still a bit of a mystery to me. So the problem is that Jody's telling this grand adventure and telling the narrative and giving us choices, but in the meantime, I'm sort of looking down at my character sheet, which would take me about 45 minutes to read thoroughly at the same time. So I'm always being distracted by this other information that I'm supposed to have in my head at all times. Yeah, so it was a little problematic.
Yeah, that said, though, I think this is one of the cleanest and most informative character sheets that I've certainly seen Dungeons and Dragons have. You can contain all of the information you need to one page, and all of the actual important stuff is highlighted and indicated. They're just the numbers you add to the roll based on the thing that you want to do. All of that is actually right there and separated into different types of activities. It's great. You just need to look at it.
Yeah. It's good because there are less numbers on the page, and it's all very clearly laid out, like what stats you have and stuff. The other thing is that there's a lot of writing that tells you about your character, which I appreciated. I know that on the previous character sheets, it was just all basically stats with their numbers and all these crazy equations that you're supposed to work out.
So many equations, Ray. Why?
But here it's more like your backstory. Okay, who are your family members? What are your guiding principles? What's your background and things like that? And I really appreciated that. It really helped me get into the role play aspect of it, knowing what my character would do as opposed to what I would do myself as an individual. I think that's an important distinction you have to make when you're playing the game.
Mm-hmm. One more thing about the spells. I like that in this edition there are a lot of spells that you use outside of combat. There's those illusion spells that you, Lee, were using to distract goblins with. You had dancing goblins that you could summon up and just send running around, and there are spells you can use to disguise people or to create stuff like illusionary stuff, or to impress people, you can shoot off fireworks and things like that. They have no effect on bad guys you're fighting, but they give you stuff that you can do when you're trying to impress a bunch of local peasants or just intimidate someone.
Yeah, they've added, I think even within the non-spell stuff, it seems like there's a lot more opportunity for improvisation to solve problems rather than, I know in the last edition it was pretty clear-cut between, here's the bit where we're, talking heads are going on, now you have to, everyone roll initiative, it's a fight, here's the grid, here are the miniatures, we're having a fight. And it was a good, tactical miniatures game, but the distinction between those two things was so noticeable that you couldn't have what I think is the most fun thing in that kind of adventure stuff where you improvise and where you slide casually from that free-form role-play conflict into combat and then back again. So it was great that there's just a lot of opportunity for the players to think outside the box to solve problems.
Did you go into this pretending that you'd never played before and in the mindset that this was your brand new beginner and reviewing it that kind of way, or are you looking at it and still now comparing it, given that you are experienced players, are you thinking about it in terms of for regular players that might want to give this a go, or just for the newbies, or what?
That is a really good question. What is the experience that we all have here with role-playing games, Jody?
I have been playing for them for 20 years on and off, and written for a few of them in that time. But when I was running this, I did do things that I wouldn't normally do. I was trying to stick as close as possible to the written adventure and the story outline they'd given, whereas normally what I would do is take that kind of thing as guidelines and sort of strip it down to the bones and then build it up again into something that interested me. But I did this time I didn't tweak the rules, even though I was tempted to, and I stuck to the letter of the story as much as possible to see what it would be like for someone doing this for the first time.
Yeah, so I've run a game for like 5 years now. Prior to that, I'd played like a handful of games of first edition when I was in high school. It's not that I'm incredibly old, it's just that the book that the Dungeon Master had actually was incredibly old.
He's not incredibly young.
Yeah, there is. We should make that clear as well. And so, like, I've played, I think, as a player character and not the Dungeon Master once in the last 5 years when I let someone else play a quick game. So I've not got that much experience as a player.
Okay.
And I went into it, I'd been keeping an eye on some of the things that they were doing when they were announcing what the new rules were like, but I didn't read up on them prior to the game. I just wanted to see what the experience would be like if I vaguely knew that to play a role-playing game, you say what you want to do and then roll the dice to determine how well you do that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I didn't want to know what the rules were so that I could see how well you could just pick them up from nothing.
Yeah.
My first introduction to role-playing was the old Hero Quest and Space Crusade games. Those are kind of, I guess, dungeon crawling versions of Dungeons and Dragons. And because I was like the oldest kid in my group of friends back then, I was always the dungeon master. So I have a bit of experience like running those really simple role-playing games. Now, my next experience with it was games like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, computer games that were based on the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. I believe that was the second edition rule set they were based on.
Yeah, that was AD&D second
Yeah,
edition.
and it seemed very complicated, like a lot of variables. And it wasn't until I joined Lee's game a few years ago that we played Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, and that was the first time I'd actually played pen and paper D&D for real. And yeah, I've never actually run a game. So yeah, I've got a little bit of experience, probably the least out of the three of us here.
So there was nothing this time round then that you found less interesting because it was a beginner's, or was designed for beginners as such?
No, I think the early game is often possibly more fun than when you've got an entrenched game. With an entrenched game, you've got cool stuff where you've got, like, you know, several years worth of storytelling, but at the very beginning, everyone is very low level. The stakes are high, even though, you know, you could be fighting, it's like 3-foot goblins armed with sticks. That stuff feels really, really gritty and dirty and dangerous. And this is well constructed as an introductory adventure. It gives you all the stuff that you want in that kind of, that setting.
Yeah. You did mention the grittiness of it. I think the combat in this edition is very random. I mean, it always is. You're always rolling dice. It seems from the fights that we've had that the dice matter even more than usual. Like they have sort of gone swinging backwards and forwards, and I have had to hold back a little bit to stop you guys from possibly dying.
Yeah,
that seems like an odd thing about this edition.
Ray and I almost died, like, in that first fight. The first fight.
Yeah, and that was partly just because I rolled well, but it was also just partly because it seems that's the way the game's designed.
Yeah.
So what do you do as a Dungeon Master, Jody, in the unlikely scenario that the party is entirely killed off in the very first encounter? Do you just call it a day, tell everyone to go home, and we don't play anymore?
Well,
he wins.
Yeah. No,
I
there
just
are
take my
no
cake,
winners.
the trophy. What the starter kit says in that first encounter is that if those first goblins defeat you, they sort of loot you and take your money and then leave you lying in a ditch somewhere so you don't actually get killed. Which is nice because it seems like they realized this could actually kill a bunch of people that first time. We better put in a note that says, no, they don't actually kill you.
Yeah, like that first fight is really hard.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's
Yeah.
like, here's your introduction, you just get a spanking.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't even get any good loot off them.
Yeah, but I think the most fun that we've had was later on when you actually got to town and we just sort of role-played for almost an entire session.
Yeah, the second session, which hopefully will be coming up in the next week or two, maybe, was we experienced the other side of D&D, which is more so the being in a town and talking to other non-player characters and trying to go on quests and stuff. And I found that The starter adventure seemed to diffuse a bit more there, possibly more than was necessary, but I guess if this is going to lead into further adventures, then you've suddenly got like 8 different story hooks that a dungeon master can take wherever they want, so that's thinking ahead.
Yeah, that's the one video gamey element of the starter set, is that it gives you a bunch of side quests in this hub town in a way that feels very video gamey. That's the one video game influence part of it. But I think, on the whole, this is the best introduction to Dungeons and Dragons that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
This is what I would recommend to someone if they saw that one episode of Community and said, I am interested in trying this thing out for reals.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it gives you everything in the box, and all those bits are actually really well constructed and informative and simple enough for people to be able to get their heads around. It seems like the sort of thing that would inspire people to then go further and perhaps want to start making their own characters and telling their own stories. Ray?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. It seemed very noob-friendly, I guess, with the simplification of all the roles and things like that, the stats. So, yeah, I think it's at least better than the 4th edition, which is good, because that's the only real Dungeons & Dragons that I've played before.
Yeah.
But it seemed a lot smoother, a lot more streamlined, and I guess less equations, less stats to worry about, and more of a focus on role-playing and being a part of the story.
So I guess if you have 4 other friends and a table large enough to hold a bunch of pieces of paper, some dice, pizza, and beer, and you are interested in Dungeons & Dragons, this starter kit is actually a really, really great place to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. And don't forget that we will be making our Dungeons & Dragons adventures public. We will be putting those on our website as a part of a limited edition podcast that will be happening over the next few weeks. So head to our website, which is zgamesau.net, if you'd like to hear those. Okay, next up, Lee's going to be talking to us about Dying Light.
So Lee, you've been playing Dying Light, Techland's new zombie game.
Yeah.
That's a bit similar to their previous zombie game, Dead Island, but is also different in new and interesting ways.
That's right, yes. Dead Island we reviewed 100 million years ago. Candi and I liked it a bit, and then I think Candi enjoyed it and then got more and more angry with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember why. I just remember I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so the thing that they got right with their first game was that it was a first-person thing. There were zombies everywhere, and you had to just bludgeon them to bits with whatever you could find on the ground that was heavy enough to swing at a zombie. And all of that felt great. You know, the zombies responded well to the physics of hitting them, and they were mean and gross and gory, and all of that was fantastic. Everything else about that game was terrible, though, which gives them a lot of scope for improvement.
Yeah.
Which I think they have with Dying Light. So Dying Light is set in the fake city of Haran. It's a kind of Middle Eastern Mecca, by which I mean like metropolis that has there is sort of a favela kind of thing, you know, with lots of like tiny poor houses and other urban areas, all of this stuff with big there are highways running around it. I mention the environment because that's the cool thing that they've added, which is this new sense of traversal. They've got basically first person parkour in it, which is difficult to do, and the last time that it was handled really, really well, I think, was probably Mirror's Edge. Since then, I think Brink had some interesting elements, and even Titanfall, but this is all about, you've got to clamber up awnings and up the side of buildings and bounce off walls and climb over cars and stuff, because when you are in an urban environment full of millions of slow but mean zombies, the best thing you can do is to be faster and more agile than them. And considering how difficult it is to make jumping and running around in first person actually feel fun and feel like real gameplay and not just the thing that you do between shooting people, like this by itself is a phenomenal achievement. That it is a joy to be told that you have a mission that's, taking you from one side of town over to the other, and then having to look at your map and go, how the hell am I going to get over there? I've played, I think, about 10 hours of the game now, so this is all just first impression stuff.
Yeah.
But the whole game is really all about just having to work out how you can travel around this very, very complex and interesting urban space, and trying to do it as vertically as possible, or things will eat you.
Cool.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of, I don't know, and forgive my limited knowledge of the zombie genre, but the first few episodes of the Walking Dead TV show was focused around sort of navigating the city and finding routes from one part to the other.
Yeah.
It seems like this is kind of like that. Like, it's mainly based on navigation and getting around obstacles and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of zombie fiction tends to focus more on the fact that you have this endless, overwhelming foe that you can't physically defeat because they keep getting back up, and video games don't really do that too well. They're mostly about being able to physically deal with and handle your foes, but in this game, particularly early on, as things progress, it changes a bit, but in this game, you can't linger around. Like, you want to go out scavenging for supplies and things, but if you spend too long in one place, if you make a loud noise, things are going to come at you. But you never feel powerless. You just have to be aware that the best thing that you can do, the best power that you have, is the fact that you can scramble up the side of things and you can piss bolt when the zombies can't. They'll just, moan and shamble past you.
And I think ultimately that's what was annoying me in the first one. I'm remembering now how frustrated I got playing it. It was a combination of that kind of thing and just not, like, there would just suddenly be 1,000,001 zombies surrounding your truck, and you couldn't reverse, you couldn't climb out of it, you couldn't do it, it was just game over, and that was that. And that was annoying, and then I think trying to find things and build weapons and stuff, and that just was not there was not enough of those options around, and then the travel in general was annoying, and I was just getting, oh my god, by the end of it, I was just wasting so much time trying to do what I thought should have been simpler things in the first one. So I was glad to hear some of those have changed or been improved upon at least.
Yeah, it is a much, much better game than the original one. I think that it might have had some of the character stripped out of it. The story is just not worth mentioning at all. But on the other hand, I don't care at all, because the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is fantastic and something that can just, as far as I can tell, it can just perpetuate. At the moment, I'm doing it's like a third or fourth quest that you get, where you have to go find a guy who has a stockpile of anti-seizure medication, and I spent about an hour and a half just figuring out how to actually get over to his house. And he has brain problems, and so wants you to go and get chocolate and his favorite video from the video store before he'll let you into his house. And then when he did that, I was just like, oh, you son, I have spent so long running up a highway. I had to figure out how to get on top of this raised highway just to get over to this part of town. And then he sent me back somewhere else. All of the missions are just basically fetch quests.
So that's similar in a way. I'm thinking back, there were those kinds of things where you'd finally get to somebody that needed saving. They'd be like, I'm not leaving until you find my battery or something. I'd be like, freaking battery. Well, you don't need a battery. Just get in the truck, idiot. That would just annoy me in the end.
It's supposed to be tedious.
Yeah,
and it sounds like it is, but the game in between those things, the fact that ordinarily being a courier in a video game is not very satisfying, but here, it is just the most fun getting around this place, and figuring out how you can get on top of a bus.
Yeah.
And maybe the zombies won't get you, but then maybe you can go inside and there'll be stuff because people left their bags in there. But actually, no, there's a zombie who was hiding in the bathroom and now he's trying to get you because you're opening up a bag.
Well, not
trapped
relying
in a bus.
Trapped on a bus. Not relying on transport, I think, is probably already, like, making this exciting for me, because that's what annoyed me the most in the last one. Such a massive island, you had to get around, but you wanted to drive everywhere, and when I couldn't find a truck, I just thought, well, I can't go there because I'm going to get eaten in 3 seconds. So that was that, and I just stayed put and then never finished it because of that.
Yeah, they've taken the cars out of it. It's a really quite a close urban environment, so
Much better.
yeah, there's so much variety built into this place as well. Like, you would think that a massive cityscape, like you think of maybe the Assassin's Creed games, even they will tend to just have generic shop after generic house. But I keep being surprised when I'm like, oh, that's a pharmacy. Oh, it has there's the signage of a pharmacy, and I went inside, and it's built like a pharmacy and has the kind of things inside there that you would need. So the environment is actually just sensible and interesting. So that the other mechanic that it has is that there's a day-night cycle, and at night everything gets 100 million times scarier.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously it's dark to begin with, but also at night is when the creepy night zombies come out, and they can climb, and they can sense you, and they can beat the ever-loving.
Why can they climb?
They're mean? I don't know. They're horrible. So at night, the game, instead of being like running around this urban environment and being like, woohoo, is all about like creeping around on the roofs and hoping that the really mean zombies don't find you, because if they do, then suddenly you're being chased across the rooftops by a snarling jerk with tentacles and weird tongues and things. So
wow, zombies have really changed.
these ones in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's something that I would like to return to on the show in future.
Cool. I have more questions.
Good. It has full co-op the whole way through, and I think that Razor needs to hop in, because the other thing is that, well, you don't have a computer.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, see? Otherwise, yes, it's right up your alley. But
yeah.
But it's going to be just as fun with Ray, because he is afraid of everything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm afraid of heights and zombies.
Yeah.
So
And that's
imagine how
just
scared I'm
in-game.
going to be.
And the dark.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
Wow, this is going to be great.
Cool. Yeah, we've been talking about Dying Light, which is available now, and you can tune in on a later episode because we'll be talking about our co-op experiences, I guess, rightly?
yeah,
All right,
you're trapped now.
Yeah, we're going to leave the studio now, but thank you very much for listening.